Hey everyone, welcome back to Today in Tech. I'm Julia Beauchamp, and I am joined as always by Macworld Executive Editor Michael Simon, as well as Computer World Executive Editor Ken Mingus. We are live on LinkedIn and YouTube, so if you have any questions or comments throughout our discussion in our episode, please leave them below and we'll be sure to answer them live. But today specifically, we're going to be diving into this new strain of malware that is affecting at least 30,000 Macs. It was recently uncovered by cybersecurity researchers. So obviously, first question is, how did they find it?
Michael, you want to take that one?
Sure. I mean, I don't know exactly what they were doing, but these security researchers, this is what they do. They
This is Red Canary, right?
Yes,
They're the ones
they're the ones who publish their findings along with Malwarebytes or something.
Right. Yeah, Malwarebytes.
Yeah.
So this is their stock and trade. They dive into Macs, PCs, check out code, check out things that are processes in the background. They figure out what's wrong, what's not supposed to be there, and whether or not it was put there by some outside malicious corporation.
Mm-hmm.
In this instance, they found that there was malware in definition only, because it didn't actually do anything malicious. It didn't actually.
Yeah, it was sort of like a proof of concept.
Yeah,
There was no payload, and although it was definitely pinging a server trying to look for more directions.
Yeah, and it's disturbing in the sense that someone was able to put this on 30,000 Macs, among them new M1 Macs, so those are not immune. There's no evidence that anything happened, that anything was kind of exploited in the wild, as they say. Apple responded by pulling the developer certificate of the person or the people who had done this. So it can't spread anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But the people who are way smarter than me and looked at this thing and studied this thing say that, yeah, as Ken said, there's no payload in the sense a payload in this instance would be remote control of your machine, a bunch of adware, whatever
some
it
sort
is.
of executable that that it would be implementing.
And it was there.
Go ahead.
It was able to do something. It just didn't do anything, and it wasn't. There was nothing that it could do or was going to do. It's not just that it was waiting to to dump a bunch of bad code. It was there, it was planted, but there was nothing that they found that even that the developer of this thing wanted it to do. So
what's sort of surprising is that Apple did move pretty quickly to revoke, as you said, to make sure that this could not spread any further. And as far as we know, it was 30,000 plus computers. I think that one of the surprises here, though, was that this was written, there were two binaries, one for Intel Macs and one for the new M1 Macs. Right. And I think the idea that, the M1 Macs had already been, sort of targeted, kind of caught Apple users by surprise, even though, again, it didn't do anything, but it could,
I don't think it shouldn't be a surprise. I mean, Apple has a target on its back. There's literally conventions of people trying to crack iOS. I mean, it's a badge of honor if you can crack anything Apple makes, because they pride themselves on their security. There is a somewhat misconceived notion that Macs are immune from viruses. So hackers and so-called bad actors, they want to prove to people that, hey, you're not immune. You can get them too, and that's true. We can. The thing is, they don't usually spread as quickly, and the way Apple updates its stuff, they're usually cut off. The problem with Windows, why viruses are so prevalent on Windows machines, is because there's a zillion of them, and they're all run by different manufacturers. They're all running different versions of the software. Some of them can update to the new ones. Some of them don't. Some of them don't know how. Some of them are managed by hundreds of PCs managed in a company, and they can't because they would break stuff. There's a million reasons why viruses spread more quickly and more widely on Windows. It's not necessarily a fault of Windows 10, as it were. Mm-hmm. Apple has it a little bit easier because, well, for one, their install base is way smaller. But for another, they can, they update their machines in a different way. They're not selling like there's no HP Mac that runs an older version of Windows, and it's a different world for Apple users. So when a virus does spring up, it's squashed pretty quickly.
Well, and to your point, Michael, about security on Mac hardware, the reason this is newsworthy is because it is fairly rare. I mean,
Yeah, of
again,
course.
you're right. And that's why it sort of caught people by surprise, because Apple has been pretty good at sort of preemptively locking things down. And then when something pops up, rolling out a patch or an update that can, stop it from getting worse. So the whole obscure security by obscurity thing has kind of gone by the wayside. There are more Macs in enterprise.
And there's going to be a lot more
environments
now too, I think.
Yeah.
So,
it's
it's definitely a story worth covering in the sense that it's interesting. For one, it's always interesting when a virus doesn't do anything. Like it's an interesting story. That's why people are covering it. And it's Apple. Anything Apple does, particularly if it's a not good thing, is going to get headlines. This is going to go on CNN and the New York Times. Like this is what happens. It's Apple. Apple's the biggest company in the world. With that comes a big giant target.
Right. I'm wondering as we've already established, it's somewhere between 30, maybe upwards of 40,000. I mean, there's probably no definitive way to pinpoint the exact number. And by now, like we've mentioned, it can't spread any longer, but that's still 30 to 40,000 devices that are infected. What do people with these devices do? What's the next step, I guess?
I mean, nothing. It's there and it's not going to do anything. If you don't have it, there's no way to check to see if you have it. I mean, listen, if you're worried, get an antivirus software. They make them for the Mac. We can argue for days about whether or not you need them. If you want it, you need it. If you'll feel better running it, then get it. They do the job. It would have found this thing and it would have gotten rid of it for you. So, spend a couple of bucks, get an antivirus software, and then you'll know for sure.
Yeah, I think moving forward, that's probably a good idea. The idea that, if you've got a Mac, you're safe and you don't need an extra layer of security. Is it 100% absolutely you got to have it? No, but I mean, once again, I go back to the, enterprise environment. I'm presuming that a lot of enterprises would be running some sort of antivirus to try to keep an eye on these things. And if you're an SMB with, a handful of Macs, it's not a big investment to protect those Macs. Again, as Michael says, given the fact that Apple has such a target on its back because of its reputation for being secure, and these people want to make names for themselves, spend a little bit of money and make sure you're safe.
Sure, and they're not foolproof. It's not going to catch everything, and hackers
is.
find their way around that too. But it's one extra layer of protection. And listen, the bottom line is just be smart. If you're not doing things that can cause you to get viruses, you're not going to get viruses. And it's not just going to, shady websites. It's clicking emails that you're not familiar with. It's, clicking on ads.
Or downloading apps that are not on the Apple App Store.
Letting people use your PC that you're not familiar with, like your kid. If it's your work machine, don't let your kid use it because they're not going to know.
Totally.
I mean, these things happen. And you just got to be smart. More than ever, with so many people working from home, this stuff's going to ramp up.
Yeah, it's a cautionary tale, if nothing else.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I feel like it probably, hopefully, this is the last that we hear of this, specific strain, as it were, Silver Sparrow. But like you mentioned, Mike, it's with everyone working from home, it seems like it's not necessarily going to be the last time that we hear about any sort of, malware, adware affecting a Mac. But from what I've gathered, not necessarily the only issue plaguing Macs right now.
Yeah, it was a rough week.
You must be the SSD, the big SSD crisis.
None of this is life altering, but it wasn't the greatest week for Apple. Yeah. So later after that, so first there was an adware thing that popped up. Then the Silver Sparrow thing popped up. Now, 2 days after that, a bunch of developers started talking on Twitter about their SSD health. Now, this is not something that a normal user, and I count myself among those people, would ever know about. But what you can do, and we have very explicit step-by-step instructions on Macworld if you want to do that, you can check your SSD health. So SSDs are different than old school spinny hard drives in that they have a very definitive lifespan.
They will
So
wear out.
Yes,
Yeah.
you can read and write. Like the other ones also had a lifespan, but for completely different reasons because they would just break.
They were mechanical.
SSDs, right. And so if the thing stopped spinning, you were screwed. Like if you dropped it or something. SSDs don't have that issue, but they are finite. So you can only read and write to them a certain number of times, and that's usually decades. It's not something that people would have to worry about, particularly if you're using like a 256 gigabyte drive. What people have found is that Mac OS, Big Sur and Catalina on both M1 Macs and some later Intel Macs have been using way more than expected read and writes to the SSD, like hundreds of terabytes. And some people have found as much as like 10% of their drive's expected life has been depleted in just a couple of months. And that's extreme. Most people have seen like 2 or 3%, which doesn't sound like much, and it's not. But compared to older Macs, it's tremendously high. And so what that does is over the course of time, degrades the expected life of the SSD. And as that gets closer to 100, you could see problems and slowdowns and issues with your Mac. Now, even if you extrapolate what these people are finding, you're still talking 8 to 10 years down the line, which probably wouldn't affect most people. But this is just starting. So we don't know how this is going to look in a year. And we also don't know what really is happening. Something to do with Mac OS. Is
it doing a lot of paging, almost like paging, like the old paging to disk?
Page swaps. It's doing something that no one really knows because it's Apple's thing. But and Apple hasn't come out with a statement explaining it. They're going to come out with a statement and says that this is expected behavior. That's their thing. But we don't know like why it's doing this, and we don't know what it means for the future and for the lifespan and the longevity of these very expensive machines that we're all using.
Well, and one thing to remember too when it comes to the SSD is it's soldered. It's on the machine.
That's right.
You can't replace it. You can't pull an SSD and put in a new one. So if and when this does die, you're going to need a new computer.
Yeah,
or
that's
effectively replace it completely.
That would be the fear, is that in 5 years, let's say, you're not
Which
going to want to spend.
Which is not that old for a Mac.
For a Mac,
it's
no.
really
No.
not.
It's
And
not.
they're expensive. You don't want to be buying a new one that often.
Exactly. And, no one's saying that that's going to happen. They're just saying that based on the theoretical degradation that they're seeing on some Macs. And listen, it could also be a problem with the software that runs the report. Like people just don't know right now. But like all things being equal, yeah, it could be an issue in 5 years. And, that would force you to buy a new Mac. Now, that might sound familiar. We've seen this issue before with the iPhone and
This
batteries.
sounds like AntennaGate. We're holding it wrong,
Apple has a history of making decisions behind the scenes that might degrade the experience in order to speed things up, in order to prolong something else, whatever it is.
Are you talking about the battery, the iPhone batteries?
The iPhone battery thing is the biggest one.
Yeah, I was gonna say, wasn't that just what the class action lawsuit was about?
Yeah.
Or am I thinking of something else? Okay.
That's exactly right. What they did there was on all their iPhones, they throttled the processor to preserve the battery. If the battery started to decline, if the battery health declined to a certain percentage, they throttled the processor, effectively slowing down your phone. Years later, like we're talking 3 or 4 years down the road, and people started noticing this, they freaked out, and Apple responded. They had a battery replacement program. Then they had a class action lawsuit, and they gave out money to people. So I don't think that's quite where this is at. But why people are kind of up in arms is because Apple hasn't really earned the benefit of the doubt here. Like they tend to do these things, and this could be a reason why, with 8 gigs of RAM, 8 gigs of unified RAM on the processor that these things are so blazingly fast because they're using the SSD to kind of portion off some of the tasks. People don't know, and that could be fine, but Apple hasn't responded, so we just don't know.
So what's the fix?
There isn't one
Like-
right now.
There's one.
There
What's,
could, I mean,
yeah,
Apple would have to come out with a Mac OS update
sure.
that, I mean, one of two things. One, they could disable the software from reading it, like, you know, because so it's called smart. There's an acronym and I can't remember what it is, but they could cut that off, so we just don't know. They did that with the battery for a while on the Mac. They took away the percentage, so we didn't even know how much percentage was left because they had issues with reporting it. So they could do that, or they could fix it in the sense that they send an update to Mac OS that handles the SSD and the RAM and the chip differently. That's less likely to happen. My guess is they're going to come out with a statement, or they could just say nothing because this could just die down. But they probably will say, if they respond, this is expected behavior and here's why. And they'll list a reason. They'll have an update that does something that
will fix it at least. Yes.
Yeah,
exactly.
and fix it in the sense that what people see makes them feel better. This stuff will probably operate in the same way, and nobody will have any problems in 5 years. That's my guess.
Happy ever after.
Yeah, I mean, listen, this is they're brand new machines. We've never seen this architecture before. We've never seen
Right.
this system before. And the problem, for lack of a better word, the problem here is that people can dive into their Macs and see stuff that they can't see on their iPhone. The iPhone's probably been doing this since day one, but we don't know, and we don't necessarily care because we're using those things in different ways than we
Right.
are our Macs. We don't keep them on all the time. We don't have them compiling code for days on end. So the way so if Apple's doing the same thing with that chip and that RAM and that hard drive or that flash drive, which is likely because Apple is able to get ridiculous things out of very little RAM and very little battery. So it's probably doing something similar over there, but we would never know because it's not going to ever affect us. And we don't have the tools to check.
Got it.
Yeah.
So
Do we?
a lot going on for Apple this week.
Bottom
still
line,
an Apple fan, for the record.
everything's fine.
I still like my M1 MacBook and MacBook Pro, and I haven't seen anything out of the ordinary.
Yeah,
And
I was
again,
gonna
I'm a typical
say.
user.
Have either of you noticed anything? Because you both have M1 Macs, right?
Yeah, I somewhat coincidentally, I had to reinstall my operating system this week, but I don't think it was related to either of these things.
Maybe you've got Silver Sparrow.
Possibly. I mean,
Yeah.
I was the only computer where it actually did something.
Right, exactly.
But since after I installed it, it was after I reinstalled, it was fine.
Perfect. Well, this is also just a reminder to our audience live on LinkedIn and YouTube. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments, in the chat, and we'll answer them live. And if we can't get to them live, we will answer them after the fact. I'll get back to you. And if it's a question that I can't answer, I will get back to you on Ken or Mike's behalf. So SSD, adware, malware, maybe next week will be a better week for Apple.
Sure.
hope
March.
so.
March is something. They'll announce something in March. So
I'm hoping for what? New
we'll-
iPad? iPad Pro?
Yeah, iPad Pro, maybe AirPods, maybe AirTags. Finally, so in like 3 weeks, we'll all be forgetting about this and spending money on more Apple stuff.
And we'll be all happy. What else is there to do with AirPods? They just announced the over-the-ear ones.
Yeah, they say they're going to add maybe noise canceling to the cheaper ones, possibly
That's why I bought the more
shorten
expensive
stems.
ones.
Well, you and everybody else, yeah.
Which reminds me, though, when you talk about the over-the-ear ones, isn't there an issue with like they don't hold their charge? You can't sort of turn them off, so they even when they're in like sleep mode or whatever, they're still losing juice. Did I read that correctly? I don't have a set, but I just
Yeah, I don't have a
seeing
set either. I think some people did notice that it was staying on for longer, but like we're talking about 10 minutes, not like hours.
Yeah.
Listen, if you're spending $550 on a pair of headphones, that's a small problem to have. I think just plug them in.
I think it's the opposite is true. If you're spending $500 on headphones, you want them to hold a charge.
Well, sure, but don't put them in that case. Like they're so nice. Like, why would you So Apple has the AirPods Max has a very ugly smart case that they have with it. And what that smart case is supposed to do is shut off the battery drain or whatever it is. So when they're not on your ears, they're not draining.
They
that
sort of go to
battery.
sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you can do that manually. So do it. Don't put them in that ugly case and it's not an issue. That's all I'm saying.
Got it. Okay.
Fair enough. So it looks like we actually have one question on LinkedIn, and I feel like I might know the answer, but I'll throw it to you guys regardless. But just as we're wrapping up here, one viewer said they own Apple everything, mostly work on their 2013 iMac, have the latest updates. How am I affected? That was the question. Are they affected? And is the answer just kind of, I don't know.
I mean, if you have the latest OS update, security is set there.
Okay.
I don't know if 2013. I mean, the latest update for that machine, because I don't think you can update to Big
That's
Sur
not
in
going to run the
2013
latest.
machine.
Yeah, that's not going to run the current OS.
I don't think so. But I mean, the bottom line is you're fine. You don't have an SSD, so those issues don't apply. And if your 2013 Mac is running as well as you want it to, power to you, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, congratulations. That's 8 years. That's that's
awesome.
That's pretty good.
But so that kind of speaks to this issue where, you might say, well, oh, big deal. So my SSD is going to die in 2028. But, that could be an investment. If you're spending a couple grand on a laptop, you want it to last 10 years.
Mm-hmm. I'm wondering if they were referencing the malware.
Yeah.
Unclear.
Well, definitely not, because
Okay.
it was for newer machines than 2013. Okay. Hackers aren't going to waste their time looking at code compiling for a 2013.
There's not enough of those machines still in use to make it
so any new virus is going to attack newer chips and newer machines.
Fair enough. All right. Well, thank you both so much. So it seems like March, Apple will more than likely redeem themselves, and this week will be a thing of the past.
They don't need to redeem themselves. I mean,
sure.
We're making small mountains out of smaller molehills here.
They're just going to change the conversation. Forget about that other stuff. Look at the new iPad Pro.
I mean,
or
it
whatever.
goes with the territory. They're a $2 trillion company, so they get $2 trillion worth of coverage for small things.
Fair enough. Maybe a little bit of hyperbole on my part, but there you have it. March, more things. Physical things, possibly out of Apple. So Ken, Mike, thank you both so much for calling in and joining. I really appreciate it. And thank you so much to everyone who has been watching live on YouTube and LinkedIn. And if you're watching after the fact and you have a question, please be sure to post it in the comments below. Like I mentioned mid-show, I'll get back to you on Ken and Mike's behalf. If you liked this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. And if you're on LinkedIn, you can go over onto our YouTube channel, IDG Tech Talk, give it a thumbs up there and subscribe. We've got new videos out just about every weekday. And you can also hit the bell icon so you're notified every single time we post a new video. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.